what I thought I would do today is break it down into two different sections. So for part one, just wanted to share a bit with you some background information, some of the local findings around food poverty and insecurity in Lambeth. And then I will pause a little bit, and then my colleague Lisa have a couple questions that are linked to the consultation questionnaire, and also as an opportunity to begin a conversation with you and to get feedback from you. For part two, I'll cover what is included in the poverty plan itself. So just moving on. So food poverty, as we know, can cause a broad range of adverse effects on people's health. These, of course, then leads to deprivation and perpetuating the cycle. So we know that people that are in food poverty are more at risk of having poor nutritional status, and that of course then begin to impact on people's health and well-being. Likewise, people with disability or with poor health, such as poor mental well-being, are more likely not to be in work and more likely to be at risk of food poverty. So as we can see, there is a whole cycle around food poverty and some of the impact that it can have on health and well-being. People, of course, can be at risk of food poverty at any stage of their life. However, the impact is particularly detrimental in children because, of course, as you know, it can compromise both physical and intellectual development. So there is a particular danger of children suffering from food poverty. Just going very quickly. So really just to say, just to give you a bit of context, so food poverty and insecurity is an issue in Lambeth, and it is a public health priority. We have quite strong track records, I think, of working in partnership across the food system to address food poverty. There are a number of programs and policies that has been established across the borough to address food poverty. There is a strong focus around how we prevent food poverty. And of course, those are underpinned by a whole range of different programs, such as health eating program, physical activity, trying to build a supportive environment to prevent food poverty. Also, just to say that over the years, we have carried out on extensive mapping of services and assets that we have in the borough. Pleased to say that it's quite vibrant when it comes to its assets and the engagement from stakeholders. So we're very lucky in that respect. And there is also a lot of work done to understand what the needs are of our communities and what some of the issues are that are leading to food poverty. So just also to share with you that the actions to address food poverty began quite some time ago. In specific, maybe at the end of 2019, we held a poverty summit across the borough with representation from over 100 stakeholders. And at that poverty summit, we agreed to develop a food poverty plan based on the good practice guidance from Sustain that was published by Sustain. Nevertheless, to say that COVID came along and put some of those plans on hold. However, as I said, it's been something that we have been working on. It's a priority and something we've been working on for quite some time. Also, as a borough, we are assessed every year by external and independent organizations such as Sustain. And I'm very pleased to say that as a borough, Lambeth has done really well in terms of the measures being put in place to address food poverty. And both in 2016 and 2018, we actually were assessed as the borough doing the most to address food poverty. During and as response of the COVID pandemic, we also were noted as one of the 5 boroughs in London really taking leadership around addressing food poverty. So I think all of that kind of highlights on the actions being taken in the borough to address this issue. Okay, so just quickly, just to say, what do we know about food poverty and what have our communities said to us about this issue? So these findings were before the COVID pandemic. So we know that prior to the pandemic, we had just under 30% of all residents lived in poverty after housing costs. We had 36% of children were living in food poverty, and this is above the national rate, which is 31 nationally. We had over 22% of children that were eligible and claiming free school meals. Also, another indicator around food poverty that we have used is the percentage of both children and adults who are of unhealthy weight, usually overweight or obesity. We know that having unhealthy weight is closely associated and linked to not having enough access to good nutritious food. And for children, measured at year 6, this is 10 to 11-year-old, we have over 26% of our children in Lambeth that are assessed as obese. For adults, we have nearly 50% of our adults populations are assessed as being of unhealthy weight, that's overweight and obese. So as you wouldn't be surprised, prior to COVID, also there was high unemployment in the borough, high level of homelessness, and we know from a lot of qualitative work that a big portion of our children, 20%, had said that they had gone to bed hungry due to lack of food at home. When asked about fruit and vegetable consumption, that featured very little in terms of the what was consumed, and what was usually mentioned was that the focus was on having enough food and not on whether it was fruit and vegetable as an option. We also know that school holidays tend to impact quite harshly on families who are already struggling with food poverty. Last year during the summer, we had a summer holiday program, and we know that 78% of children said that had they not been going to the holiday provision, they would have gone without anything to eat that day, or if they had anything, it would be something unsubstantial such as crisp. Right, so those were some of what people were saying to us prior to COVID. Now, we know that COVID what really just exacerbated the issue around food insecurity. Figures from London show that it has quadrupled, so 4 times worse. I'm sure Lambeth is also a reflection of that. We know that food insecurity in households with children has nearly doubled. We also know that we have a cohort of our population who are at risk of food poverty. You wouldn't be surprised to know so that people who are unemployed, adults with disabilities, adults with children, in particular, single parent household, and our BAMI community are some of our population groups most at risk of food poverty. We also know that as a result of COVID, all adults reporting income losses greater than 25% are at significant risk of food insecurity. And this is really also including people who would have, prior to the COVID pandemic, who were at economic risk of food insecurity. So just quickly, I'm so sorry, I can't. Right. Apologies for that. I just need to get onto the right slide. Right. Okay. Right. So really, we know that, as I was saying, that the pandemic has really exacerbated all these issues. And as I said, we know that people who would have been vulnerable were are at risk of food poverty and insecurity.
Sorry, Vida, sorry to interject there. We can't see your slides.
Right.
You were leading into them, and I wasn't sure exactly where you were going to start.
Okay, can you see them now?
No, I can't.
Right. Wonderful technology. I can see them very well. I'm just wondering if what we could do, if I pause there, because the aim of part 1 was really to share with you some of what we knew from the engagement carried out with our community on the impact it was having prior to COVID, and obviously during the pandemic and as we go through it. So I will pause there for now and hopefully get the slides sorted out, but we could then go to the sections around the question, discussion, feedback, and then part 2, I will look at the poverty plan itself and what's included in those. Yeah, so over to you, Lisa, and in the meantime, maybe if you could share it while I try and fix whatever's gone wrong here.
Okay, thank you, Vida. Yeah, I think actually the second lot of slides is going to be the most important bit, because that's about the action plan, which I think most people have questions about. So we will work on getting that up. I know we had it up earlier, so it is perfectly possible. But in the meantime, we just wanted to get some feedback. I know there's going to be a lot of questions anyway, but we just thought to kind of prompt some of those question areas, we were going to ask you a few things back that you will have to put, I think, into the chat or the Q&A section, because I know that you're not able to actually speak to us. So if I read out some of the questions, Caroline is going to look at the chat and keep an eye on it, and I think we will be able to expand on them later on at the end of Vida's second section, which should be, I'd say, within the next sort of 10-15 minutes, because I know we've only got until 4 o'clock. So I'm just going to ask the first question, which is from your experience, are the main barriers to your community accessing adequate and nutritious food in a socially acceptable, dignified manner? So if you have any answers to that or any thoughts about it, it's all about having food that's provided in a dignified way and a socially acceptable way. We've discovered through the pandemic that a lot of those things weren't actually met. And we'd like to think of some ways that we can actually address these issues. So if you can think of any ways to answer those questions or to talk about it later, that would be much appreciated. I think I'm going to just hang on a few seconds for some responses to see if anybody has any ideas. So it's the barriers to your community accessing adequate and nutritious food in a socially acceptable and dignified manner. And if there's nothing else, I will move on. No, I think we should move on because I don't want any dead air here.
Oh no, Lisa, we've got someone's putting the Q&A. The cost is a barrier for access, and then the result is usually giving food away for free, which then has a stigma attached to it.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you. I mean, these will all be looked at after this event and in conjunction with the rest of the consultation responses, which will be quite a big job, but we need as much information as we can back from everybody. I think one of the questions that we really want to know is, are there any sectors of society who are not receiving support? Are there some gaps that we've not addressed? So gaps in society who aren't receiving support. I don't know. Nothing there yet. I can't see anything.
Nothing. No, not yet.
That's something we can talk about later. Finally, on this section, with hindsight, what changes would you make if you were making a kind of food response during the pandemic for your organisation or as an individual? What changes would you make in terms of your food response with hindsight?
Lisa, just hopping back to the last question, someone said the middle group, people who aren't in crisis, who earn just above the threshold but not enough to feed their families. Right,
that's a good one. That kind of just about managing sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, so any thoughts in hindsight about how you would change your food response through the pandemic? We all learnt a lot. Better listings of the options. Okay, any more? No, I think we want to move on to the action plan itself.
Lisa,
yes.
I'm just wondering, I seem to remember that also we wanted to find out if there was anything from what was discussed around what we knew about the community that we may have not mentioned or missed.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I mean, I could come on to that later, but yeah, it is a similar sort of question. It's, what has the pandemic taught you about food poverty or insecurity that you didn't already know? So again, it's maybe about the gaps. It's what we thought we knew until it actually happened. Have you come across something that surprised you?
So I was more thinking about some of the findings from the first part of the presentation. So we talked about those groups that we felt were vulnerable to food poverty. And I wondered if as a group you felt that any other groups that might be vulnerable to food poverty may have been missed from our local findings.
Okay, yeah.
Lisa, there's a couple of comments in the chat box. So we've got someone suggesting freelancers and CICs. So I think that's community interest companies. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joseph. Struggling with government support. And we've also got someone saying first-time appealers not familiar with appealing for support. The additional emotional support required in addition to meeting primary needs.
Yeah.
And then we've got someone else in the Q&A who's made a suggestion of asking for donations rather than giving food out for free and opening it to everyone rather than those in need, so you can remove the stigma.
Okay, great, thank you. So I think we're going to move on to section 2 if we can.
Yeah,
getting on?
That's fine. I was just going to ask, are you able to share the second part of the slides? Might make it a bit easier because I think my system's freezing up a bit here.
I will try and open, let's have a look. You just have to bear with me, I wasn't expecting this.
Nope. Again?
I'm just looking, here we are. That one, sorry.
I have it opened in my one.
Oh, if you could open, that would be great, if you could.
That would be brilliant, Natalia.
Yes,
yeah.
The one that you sent us, okay?
Yeah.
Is this it?
Yeah, we just need to go back.
So that's the end
yeah.
of it.
Okay, yes. I will stop sharing first because it's, bear with me.
We can just go to part 2.
Yeah, part 2. Bear with me. Is part 2 the plan?
Right, I can't see anything.
Yeah, part 2 is
yes,
the plan.
Part 2 is the plan. Okay, I have it open. Bear with me. I will.
Right, so.
Is that it?
Yeah,
yeah.
So that was the beginning.
Okay.
So we just go to part 2. Okay.
Part 2. Is that?
Yeah. Just keep on going. I'll let you know. Just
keep on going.
Flick through.
This one.
There.
Okay, this is part 2.
Okay. Part 1, let's go right on to the next slide. Really, just as I said, to quickly define what we mean when we refer to both insecurity and food poverty. So there is just some. So as you can see from the screen, we define food poverty really as the inability of individuals to have access to obtain an adequate nutritious diet in an acceptable way. And obviously, food security is having that ability, but not only around obtaining food, but to obtain sufficient quality food that will nourish and provide a balanced diet. And very importantly, it also highlights the need to have access to food in a socially acceptable and non-stigmatizing way. So it's more than just having food, but as nutritious and social. Natalia.
Okay, next one.
Yeah, that's fine. So just quickly to say what's in the plan itself. The plan is adopting a multi-system and life course approach. I mentioned that really we can be at risk of food poverty at any stage and at any age. I mentioned that we are particularly concerned with children because of the impact it could have on their development, but really we could be at risk at any stage. So we want to take a life course approach. We looked at obviously what the extent of poverty is across the borough, and the plan is aiming to look at food poverty at 3 levels. So level at prevention level, crisis management level, and looking at the wider social environmental factors underpinning many of these issues. We have highlighted the key priorities for year 1. It's a 3-year plan. However, we felt, and in particular, given the current situation and the response to the pandemic, that we should have key priorities for year 1. A lot of the actions in the food plan will be and will need to be ongoing. As I said, it's a 3-year plan, but we want to identify those indicators for success. Yeah. Just moving on.
Yes.
Yeah, we could just move on. These are just really the 3 areas that the plan includes. So just to pull out some key examples of what is under the preventative action. We have included a series of actions around financial support. We know that food poverty tends to have its underlying cause in poverty more generally. So we know that having financial security many times help is that we tend to see. Lambeth Council for the past 10 years has been a London living wage. However, we also want to take action to work with local employers to encourage and really trying to make every employer in Lambeth also paying the London living wage, again fitting into that economic support. Also, we want to work to facilitate access to good nutrition. Included within that preventative action, some examples are ensuring that everyone that are entitled to Healthy Start vouchers. I won't go into too many details, but it's a national support scheme, have access to that support. If we just go back, and other schemes that we have locally. So we just go back a bit, Natasha, flicking through. So such as free school meal. I just have a message that you might not be hearing me very well. I'm so sorry about that. But hopefully you can read what's on the slide. So we can just go to the next one. Right, so if anything we've learned from COVID is in our plan. As part of crisis management, we want to make sure that we have good signposting tools for frontline providers. We talked about some of the stigma that food poverty can cause. So really with a lot of focus on ensuring that that support is provided in a non-stigmatizing way. I'm sure we'd all agree that the last thing we want is to add to any bad feeling that those who are already at risk of food poverty, if it's delivered in a way that it's not acceptable. We talked about ensuring that even when emergency food aid is provided, that we pay attention to the nutritional value around it, and also maximizing opportunities that we have to deliver other services. So many people look at this section more as having that wraparound services, so that if family or residents are in need of support around food, they might well be in need of other support, such as financial support or signposting to other services. And last but not least, also working across the whole food system. So also including how we liaise with food enterprises and businesses. Just moving on quick. And then you also mentioned that the third area around the food poverty action plan is how we also take into consideration those wider environmental factors. I mentioned that we know that for many people, food poverty is a reflection of financial poverty, really, and how we remove some of those wider environmental factors leading to people being in food poverty. And underneath that section of the plan, we've included coordination and cooperation around the different networks, so that we can identify the right support for people who might be at risk, looking at those wider food system issues such as climate change, and how we address inequalities within the food system, things like how we work to minimize food waste, also monitoring what is happening locally so that we can take actions that will make a difference to people, and using other levers that we might have. I mean, we have noted here levers that the council might have, but we know that across the food system, we would also have opportunities for other levers that we can utilize. But here, for example, is using the planning and business rate to help shape local areas, and also ensuring that when we work as different groups and stakeholders, that we are also that we have consistent healthy eating messages. So, and then just also other areas that's included is around the grants and loan. I'm so sorry. Right. Okay. We have one more. I mentioned initially that we have identified key priorities for year one. As I said, it's a 3-year plan. We wanted to start with identifying priorities for year one. Many of the actions going forward are either ongoing or will be going forward for 3 years or more. But just really to say, for year one, we want to prioritize how we coordinate and how we provide provision to emergency food, how we ensure we deliver healthy, nutritious food, how we work with schools to promote the uptake of free school meals, providing training so that people can be signposted to the right services, how we use their council tax to support people, and how we also maximize access that we have to some of those national schemes that I mentioned before. And I have already mentioned around the living wage and increasing access to publicly owned land for food growing. So those are really the priorities for year one. And as I said, it's a 3-year plan. And if we just finish the next slide, Natalia, as I said, the consultation started on the 27th of January. It's ending tomorrow. We really want to invite you to either here today with us or to really add your comments and your feedback. It's the consultation being advertised online on Lambeth Council. We will, following the consultation, we'll be launching the plan in April 21. So, and that really is, I think, the end of this slides. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for all the technical hitches. Someone put in the chat that my voice was breaking up, so I hope you managed to hear most of that.
Most of it, yeah. Okay, so very quickly, because I'm very conscious of time, we've only got about another 17 minutes. So I know people will have questions, so I'm going to cover these areas, which I'm pretty sure will be raised in a lot of your questions anyway. So first of all, we're asking if you think the proposed actions are clear or not. If there's anything that you would like to see that aren't in the actions, there are 21 of them, so bear that in mind. I'm sure you've read through them. something else I meant to mention, it is 11:59 tomorrow night is the closing time, so you do have all day tomorrow to respond, but that's still not very long. So yeah, any of the proposed actions that you'd like to see more detail or what we have and haven't covered? Do you agree with the key priorities that we set out? Vida just went through, I think there's 8 of them on the screen for the first year. Do you agree with them? Have we missed any, or have we included any that you wouldn't necessarily agree with? Okay. Thirdly is, do you think that the action plan covers the areas that we need to be addressing? Have we missed any? Are there any gaps? What else should we be adding? What should we be not including? Very similar to question 2, really. And the final one is, the pandemic has shown us that collective cross-sector partnerships work best. We discovered that working with across the board CVS, various organisations, individuals really did work very well. And it's become very evident that that is needed for the future. So they do feature a lot in the actions. So this cross-sector partnerships are going to be really important. So we'd like to know from you what you see your role as an organisation or an individual would be in supporting these actions, how you could help, and how you would want us to support you to do this. Very important that we want to know what you need from us. So that's a really important one, and I think that will probably come up in a lot of the questions to Vida in the next section. We have expertise within the council that we can tap into. We just need to know what you need from us. So sorry, there's quite a few questions there. It's basically, where are the gaps in the action plan? Do you think we've hit the right priorities? Where have we missed? Where are the gaps? And what you need from us. Okay, so I had to rattle through that because otherwise it would be hitting 4 o'clock and we wouldn't have had any chance from anybody to ask any questions. So I'll hand you back. Caroline, do you want to have a look to see if there's anything? You had some before, I think, anyway.
There's a few questions. So someone's asked about teachers and key workers in food poverty. If there's any suggestions or developments looking at that.
Yes. So they very much form parts of our key stakeholders. So I said the plan itself would cover some of the detail areas and some of the stakeholders that we feel have a key role. So just an example around teaching in schools, the uptake of free school meals. It's one of those key action points that obviously school would have a big role to play.
Lovely, thank you, Vida. And someone else has asked about, are we encouraging residents to grow their own, even if it's just window boxes for herbs, and how are we making use of communal gardens on estates that could use more of the green areas for growing?
Yes. So within the plan, there is a section around food growing, and there is also highlighting the importance of working with community groups and identifying those lands that, you know, the council might have some say in how that land is used and how we can promote and encourage food growing. We know that not every land that is bare can be used for growing, but where they are the potential, it is definitely one of those areas that we would like to encourage, promote, and work with communities on.
Lovely, thank you, Vida. And there's a couple more here. We've got someone asking about the Lambeth VCS Food Hub Group, and is this consultation and the meeting linked into that?
So the VCS, again, like our school community, they're key stakeholders. We have worked with them more so as part of the response to COVID. We have a ongoing engagement with the VCS community that has become even stronger as a result of COVID. I think we call it roundtable discussion. We have ongoing conversation with the VCS. Recently, the council has commissioned a single point of contact for distributing surplus food across the borough, and it was kind of based on that learning from the response to the pandemic and the need to take a more coordinated approach across the borough in addressing some of those issues.
Lovely, thank you. We've got quite a few questions coming in now. How does this plan relate to the various food growing projects in Lambeth? And they give an incredible edible Lambeth as an example.
Yes, I guess I'm kind of repeating myself. So Incredible Edible Lambeth, our school, our VCS, our NHS, our local businesses, they're all key groups. We are extremely aware that addressing food poverty will require the collaboration from across the sectors. Although for the plan we have specifically highlighted those actions that we can take at council level, maybe at NHS level, VCS level, at schools level. I think also we would like to understand if there are any other key stakeholders that we have not included and that feel they have a role to play in addressing food poverty. I think this is a really good opportunity to engage and have a conversation of what that would look like and how we can be more joined up.
I think that links nicely. A couple of people have asked questions about local businesses, social enterprises who want to provide meals. Is there funding for this? So
in terms of funding, I think that will depend on what is being proposed and what opportunities there are. I'm hugely aware that a lot of services may require funding. That funding may not come maybe directly from the local authority, but there might be opportunities to identify where we can access funding and what that would need to look like. But I think those would be down to the detail of what's on offer and to whom.
Okay, lovely. And we've got another question. What is your framework for developing an anti-racist approach?
So we have a huge priority around addressing inequality and inequity. Actually, that sits at the core of public health. It underpins a lot of what impacts on people's well-being, on health. Racism is an aspect around inequality and inequity that is very what's the word I'm looking for? It's like many prejudices. It's extremely detrimental to people's health, and therefore would be a priority for public health in terms of how we offer services or what is expected or how issues are addressed.
Lovely, thank you, Vida. And someone has also asked about food banks being acknowledged in the report but not mentioned explicitly in the key priorities for year one. Is that an omission?
No, it's not. I think we recognize, and when we were carrying out some of the local findings, we know that food banks have played a big role in supporting vulnerable communities. In particularly, we know that families, when they are either waiting for benefits to be organized or to have access, they have depended very heavily on food banks. So the food poverty plan recognizes the absolute value that food banks play in terms of its response to emergency. I guess just really to say that in addition to how we address emergency, we also want to take action to prevent, and we also want to take action that really deal with the root causes of food poverty. And so also kind of to see those all jointly, really, rather than, one as opposed to another.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there's a question. Thank you, Vida. There's a question on monitoring and evaluation of the. It would be interesting to understand monitoring and evaluation of the 3-year action plan, the set KPIs, and how organizations like Community Shop can link to public health. Is there scope for communities to inform policy moving forward?
Yes. So I guess the answer is yes, yes. How we monitor the actions being proposed is part of the outcome measures. So if you look at the action plan itself, they are the actions, and then we have identified what outcomes measure each one would have. We are absolutely planning to ensure that we review and we monitor this. That was partly one of the reasons why we wanted to have the 1-year priorities. We are very aware that this is more than 3 years, if you like, and longer term than 1 year. So it's really kind of making sure that we have frequent review, frequent monitoring, that we understand and we learn from year 1 priority, and we can then take action year 2, year 3, and going forwards. So monitor and review, very important. The next section was around the community shops, did you say, or?
Community, that question is about community shop.
So, yes.
Yeah, I think you've answered it, yes. It's about policy making and if there is a role for them.
There definitely is. Yeah. There definitely is as part of the wider system.
There's 3 more, and we have 5 minutes, but these are about possible roles of different groups. The role of AIDS concern playing in the strategy, as well as the role of the elderly or learning disabilities. And lastly is the role of midwifery, I think. Yes. If you can fully consider the role of midwifery and health visiting as a more upstream way of identifying families at risk. Very good question. Potential risk of food insecurity. So 3 different cohorts of group: AIDS concern, older people, and then with learning disabilities, and midwifery and health visiting. How are you able to engage with them in the strategy, Vida?
Yeah, so all the groups mentioned, I would identify those as key frontline workers. They are extremely valuable in that they are the ones that are many times in contact with families and are able to identify those at risk. I know we don't have a lot of time, but we have a number of programs that liaise specifically with the groups in terms of ensuring that we have consistent messages and supporting resources, so that when frontline workers such as the one mentioned come into contact with vulnerable families, they're able to either signpost appropriately, raise the issue, or ensure that families are offered the appropriate support as when needed. So I guess, as I said, without going into too many details for each one of the group, they're all key frontline workers, and we would definitely need to be working very closely with them to ensure that we are identifying the right people as well.
Unless I have missed, I think that was the last question. Can you see any more, Caroline?
That is it. Thank you. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much, Vida.
I think we've covered every question in the chat box and in the Q&A.
Lovely. Before we finish, I'm going to quickly just do a poll on the screen. It's just 3 really short questions. It would be great if you could just fill them out for me. I'm going to launch it now, just to give us a little bit of feedback on today. and let us know if you found it useful and if it's influenced your feelings about the food poverty consultation. So if you could all just give me 2 minutes of your time and fill that out, we would really appreciate it. And then we will wrap up. Thank you very much. I can see lots of people filling it out for me. Lovely. All right. Well, we can leave that open and wrap up, Natalia.
Okay. Yes. So unless we don't have the time now, it's 1 minute before 4 o'clock. We would like to thank Vita and Lisa for sharing with us the plan on food and poverty. And just a reminder that the consultation is still open up to 11:59 tomorrow. Oh, it's yes, 11:59 before the 24th or the 24th of February. So you still have time to read the whole plan in the public health website. I assume it's in the public health website. Mm-hmm. And if you would like to share your ideas, feel free to be engaged with the consultation. So thank you very much, everyone, for staying up to the last minute. And we're hoping it's really, the poll is showing that it's been useful or extremely useful. So thank you very much. And we hope to be together again for another food and poverty session, maybe after the consultation, and we will see how the views of people have been considered in the consultation document. Is that okay?
I've just shared the link in the chat for the consultation plan and the link for the survey. So please click on that if you haven't seen it and have a look.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, everyone. And thanks, Vida. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Caroline. And keep safe, everyone. Stay COVID-free. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.